Okay, so now we're going to do another code along assignment. Again, we're doing assignments for these two first week 2 assignments, and then we'll have a discussion. I'm still working on what that's going to look like. All right, so now do our code along, and now we're going to talk about variables. But I have a little prerequisite before we do variables, and let's talk about JS comments. So in your code, there's reasons various times you want to leave comments. Okay, so comments are kind of opposed to JavaScript statements. Okay, statements are code. So like a code statement would be this line right here. Okay, this line right here. These are statements that are made up of JavaScript commands that and keywords that we use to accomplish a specific thing in JavaScript, and I talked about this last time. Okay, so one thing we can do in JavaScript is we can do // that's a comment. Okay, and then we could say generally this is called a single line comment. Okay, and then we could do another one, and these are actually me typing them out, which is probably the least efficient way to do them. Okay, I believe that's right. Is that right? And this is a multi-line comment in general. Okay, so that means like if you want to go multiple lines, it doesn't have to be. This is also called a block. Okay, this also can be called a block. And by the way, you should be typing along, hopefully better than I am typing. Okay. So now what's cool about your VS Code is it'll actually do this for you. Okay. So these are toggle line comment. So if you ever want to do a line comment, like for me, if I wanted to comment this line, I could do commands. I think on the Windows it's control / and then that will do the other one for me, right? So then the other one here is a little more involved. So I believe that is for Mac, it's Option up Shift A if I want to do a multi-line comment. Okay. So now let's talk about why you leave comments. So that's how you do them, but why do you leave them, right? So why do you leave comments in your code is either for yourself or for somebody else, or in this class, it's because I may do something where I'm going to do a coding challenge. Now there'll be various ways we do it today or through this class, but today I actually have a specific question or a specific challenge for you. It's not a big one, but what I'm going to do is I have my code up here. I'm not going to run it in live server yet, but I'm going to actually change the view over here to where we can be both looking at the main, and by the way, what I did is I split so that I could split the editor, which is kind of cool. There's also keyboard shortcuts for everything. But because I was on JS main, it actually said, okay, I'm just going to split it and use that. So what I can do is over here is select this. And what I want you to do is for a moment here, right, without going to your code editor, just looking at my code, can you tell me, will the code that is listed here, right, so the HTML, the script, the way we talked about it, right, the body, content, the commands we talked about last time, is this code going to work? Just by looking at it. And I know it's so tempting to go write it, which by the way is not necessarily a bad impulse, is to go write it. But in this case, I want you to just read it, right? Because I went over what it did last time. So, right, will this code work? Right? So before you do anything else, stop right now, answer the question. And again, this is not if you get it right or wrong, I'm giving you points or not. It's more for you to say how well did you kind of pay attention to, and not necessarily understanding all the JavaScript or understanding all the HTML, but in general, did you understand, right? So before I give you the answer, right, I want to know your answer. Because part of this is I'm also teaching you how to take this class. And part of the reason, because I grade on commits. So what I'd want to know, I'm going to look at your comment here, right? So the coding challenge, and then and so then write your answer, right? You don't have to type that. That's just where it would go. Okay, so now before you move on, what you want to do is commit this, right? So once you have your answer, then I'm going to bring back my terminal, right? I'm on my private repo. I'm going to go get status. I'm going to go OK. And now, because I've already tracked main, now I just have a change to main. I do git add star, git, oh, let me clear this. Git commit -m, and I ask for a specific commit, comment, and code challenge. Can I copy it? Sure you can. Okay. So what that does is it shows me, and you, if you didn't get it right, don't worry about it, right? But do know that that's the importance of trying to read code, because oftentimes you can read code even before you can write code. And not uncommon either in the English language, being able to read something before you can write it. Okay, or vice versa. Now, will this code work? Nope. It will give an error message. So what I'm going to do here is, I had, from the last time I ran the first assignment, I had stopped my live server. Okay, but I'm going to show you, because what will happen right now if I go live, right now, with the setup that I have with my private repo open with a W2 folder, and you may have already seen this, but if I go live, it'll actually, in this case, because I'm in the root directory, the root is actually the private, even though it's not showing here. Now, how do I know that? The root means the starting folder from wherever the index HTML is, okay? From there, right? But in this case, because of live server, we're actually, this is the root, okay? Now, actually, I'm going to go over that in more detail later, so don't worry about it. And actually, I probably didn't say that in the best of ways, so we'll get more to that. But because this is the folder we have open, this is considered root, and we are now in a folder inside a root. Live server is like, hey, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to show you the README file, or do you want to look at the folder? I could just say, look at the folder, and then by default, it'll pull up the HTML. So the code that I had in here broke, because it should have had hello world based on our last discussion. And if I right click and hit inspect, right, cannot set property of null, null nothing basically, setting text content. So if I go into source, and look at this, it even shows me here kind of what's in error. But this is actually not even that helpful, because the answer to the question is that I had changed this to H2. And so now this variable, my heading, okay, is looking for an H2 in the document, which is the index file. And now you'll see some other stuff, so this gets a little confusing here. Okay, let's go back up. Where is that? Where's our, okay, our content. So this is injected by live server. So here's our H1. So what happens is, when it runs, let me just show you, because this is good to know, this line, and I wish it'd do a better job of telling you, but it doesn't. So you kind of have to figure this one out based on experience, and this is why part of what I'm trying to give you is experience. If I typed that, right, null, can't find it, nothing in there. That's why H1 works, is because that did exist in the index file. Okay, so the answer right there. And actually, I could have had, for those of you that knew the answer, is actually just to fix the code. Yeah, that's good thinking about going forward. Okay, so now that gives us our first, right, commit, gives us our first coding challenge. So let's move on to actually talking about variables. All right. So at this point, we've already seen our first variable called my heading. Now, because you've been coding, this may not be yours. So we've used a command, a keyword in JavaScript, const. This is what we choose to name it. Now we're choosing to name this based on and this is what I want you to get, a naming standard. And that naming standard is called camel case. Okay. Let's actually go do a quick Google search, or I could have a chat GDP, either one, right? What is camel case. Camel case. Camel case. It's a good image right here, right? So camel case is used in not just JavaScript, but and there's snake case, there's Pascal case. So if you're using snake case, it'd be here, right? So if we were in JavaScript is generally, you don't have to. By the way, this is not a have to. This is a style, right? So what we do is when we're using, and this kind of goes back to why are we even using my heading? Well, one of the things when you declare variables, again, you're choosing the name. What we store in that variable is a little more complex here. We're going to make it simple in a minute. But what you store in that variable, right, will be various types of data. And this is a reference, but we could make it much simpler. But we chose this, and the way we wrote it syntactically, meaning the syntax of the actual variable name is based on a standard called camel case. And for this class, right, naming standard called is used in this class. Okay, so when you're creating variable names, I want you to use, right, the camel case standard. All right, now let's actually I'm going to drop that for a minute and open up the link I gave you in MDN, right? And when we talk about variables, even though the link here will take us to the top of the page, right? Variables are below, but variables are the beginning of understanding how to write JavaScript statements and declarations, okay? So JavaScript applications consist of statements with appropriate syntax. Okay, now, so appropriate syntax. Well, let's just finish this. A single statement can span multiple lines. Multiple statements can occur on a single line. You'll see this in this class for sure, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, this is good. Each statement is separated by a semicolon. That's why sometimes letting the injection of the semicolon happen may not be based on the way you've written it what you wanted. Okay, that's actually this isn't a keyword but a group of keywords, and this will get confusing later. Just a preview. Okay, so now they're going to talk about flow control, which we're not even to that yet. So I'm going to scroll down to the actual declaring variables that I wanted you to go to. Okay, so there are 3 ways to declare a variable. We've seen const, and const is a read-only named constant. Okay, so once you declare, right, and assign. So there's really declaring using a declare keyword, var, let, const, right? Giving it a name, and then giving it a value. This is just what we're using to declare these variables. Okay, so if we look at const, right? Now, this is going to start talking about this part of why MDM is not the best for beginners, because there's so much verbiage here that can get in our way. But that's okay, because we can kind of touch on it as we need to. But it declares, right, a declaration declares, a const declaration declares block scope local variables, right? Can't be changed later through assignment using the equals. What does that mean? Well, we see one here, so let's actually just write that. So now come over here and write const number equal 42, semicolon. So now that we have, so we've used const, we know it's read-only, we've given it a name. Now in this case, because it's a single variable name, right, meaning it's not camel case, how could we make this camel case? Do my number. That would make it camel case. Again, both will work. This is a matter of style, but this is using the declaration. This is using the assignment. So what it says is that whatever is on this side now is stored in that variable name called my number. Okay? So because we've used const, we can't now say my number equal, okay? So let's see if we can do that. Oh, look at that. Okay? So the first time we set up the variable, we declared it, we assigned its value 42. And then, because it was already declared, we said now that's equal to 43. What's interesting is the editor allowed us to do it, but our DevTools said, Now it's called a TypeScript error, okay? And in this case, notice how it shows you the error here. And that's because it's like, and there's something called TypeScript, which we will talk about later in this class. It's a subset of JavaScript that is strongly typed. And you might go, what does this mean? So programming language. Let's do dynamically typed. Okay. Okay, so a language that is dynamically typed if the type of variable is checked during runtime. Okay, so common languages that use dynamically typed is JavaScript, Objective-C, PHP, Python, Ruby, Lisp, and TCL, which I don't know what that is. Okay, so what these mean is they're dynamically typed, which basically means you can put any kind of value in them without having to tell the programming or write in the programming language what kind of variable it is, okay, or what kind of value it is. So these are JavaScript is dynamically typed. So that would be opposed to, I'm just going to do this instead of having to type it all over, strongly typed. Okay, so this is the other strongly typed, right? And then you could read here. And actually this probably would be better, right? As a chat question, because we'd get more context. And it's also called weak. That's the other way you might hear it referred to in Stack Overflow. Boy, we could talk about the difference between where, and some of the content from chat actually comes from Stack Overflow for our specific domain, and domain means within the programming language. Okay, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole too much. But what we can do is know that JavaScript is dynamically typed, okay, and it's also called weak, and basically that means we can set any value. So I could, if I, instead of wanting to do a number here, I could also do a string there, which by the way, I'm going to get rid of this because that errors out. So now I've changed this from a numeric value, which we'll talk about something called coercion later, which JavaScript kind of does some of this under the covers, which can drive traditional dynamically typed programming language programmers crazy. And that's why some people give JavaScript a really bad name. Okay, so we know that when we use const, right? So there's three ways. Let's go back to basics here. There's three ways generally: const, let, and var. So let's look at let for a minute. So if we did this, if we said, now instead of const, we might say let my string equal hello. Let's move this back to a value, or a numeric value, right? Oh, by the way, make sure I'm doing that. So now, how is this different, right? So now we could say my string equal to new hello, which by the way, notice that I am not consistently doing single or double quotes. We'll talk about that probably in the next one. In general, you can use either, but whatever you're using, be consistent would be the key, I think. So now, when using the let, so let's go back to here, right? So no error here. I already know it reloaded, right? So, and I could, instead of just string, I could actually type, right? I could even though it says my string, I could put a numeric value in there. Integer in this case, not floating point. Floating points actually, we'll talk about how JavaScript language stores this stuff later on. But it doesn't matter because I've chosen this name. What I give, what I assign into that variable name is my choice. But the reason I want to write or set up good or create good variable names is they tell the reader of my code what that's doing. And this, right, not a good idea, right? Because somebody would look at that and go, hey, it's a string. Why is it got a value? Okay, so this is also what we will term block scope, and actually both of these are block scope. Now we're going to get into block scope later, and it's basically when we're writing blocks, this is going to behave and it'll declare within that block. So just a little preview of what's to come. But here, and this is what I want to tell you, general rule. General rule for variable declaration. Okay? Is that right? Is this. Let me go back here. In general, use const. Unless you have a specific name, a need to actually give that variable a new value. Okay, and in that case use let. And and most of all, try to avoid var. Now, MDN does go over var because you're going to see it. And the reason we're trying to get away from var is because of the way it handles declaring or setting up the variable, and it can cause just confusion. It's not clear. So in general, for our class, use const. Unless there's a reason, use var if you need to declare the new variable, and at all costs, try to do not use var. Okay, so that's what I want is, right? I want you to write general. Actually, just write it there. Just write your understanding. Right? Okay. So I didn't even show var. I definitely recommend here is looking at, right? Because you can still read, one of the things I did early on in my career is I would read things I didn't understand. Because later on when I read it again some other time, and the reason I'm saying that as I scroll through this is for most of you, this is code that you've probably never seen, right? Hoisting is a reason we actually try to stay away from using var because of the way that happens. And we'll probably show cases of that as we move through, but in general. So my recommendation is to read through these three because you're going to see them again and again, especially in this class. Okay, and then I will probably start. So notice how I I put the tree ways. It's so funny. I listed them differently as well. That's crazy, but right. So for this, this actually now completes our code along for variables. And so what you'll do is you'll commit your code now, right, with the commit message variables, and then you will push your code. Right, at this point, I feel like you should have this process, so I'm not going to actually walk you through it. If you need help, please come see me. Be happy to help you with any of that. Okay, so how I would grade your code is, did you get the commits? Did you include and I'll read your comments, right? So in this case, you're going to have 2 commits that you will for this assignment. Okay, and that's how I will grade it. All right, time to move on to the next one.